He's Frank Schwab. I'm Jason Fitz. Charles Robinson going to join us in a few minutes. Full transparency here, guys. We recorded all of today's inside coverage. I went to go walk the dog. Everybody moved about the cabin. And then all of a sudden, breaking news hit that Daniel Jones has been waived by the New York Football Giants. So we wanted to get back together, reconvene, and break down this big news. Frank, first and foremost, I don't think this is shocking news. This is happening because he has an injury guarantee on his contract. The Giants are not comfortable with the possibility that something could happen. We saw this all the way back in the day with Steve McNair with the Titans, right? Like, once you decide this guy is not your starter, if he even gets hurt, God forbid, lifting weights in the facility, you are on the hook for that injury guarantee. So not that uncommon. A business decision was made. Daniel Jones and the Giants part ways, which explains partially, I think, the tearful statement he made to the media yesterday. Like, it feels like everything was bubbling up for today to happen. So now he gets the opportunity, should he clear waivers, which he will, to play somewhere else. But mostly this becomes about the Giants and Daniel Jones and their relationship right now.
Yeah, and I think we have to just start by looking back at the Daniel Jones era. People might scoff at that, but it was 6 seasons, and this is kind of the roller coaster you go on with a quarterback. You know, he started off pretty good. He had some good games his rookie year. You go back to the Tampa game, looked really good. And, you know, he was probably overdrafted at the time by Dave Gettleman, but it really looked like the Giants had their guy. And then he struggled a little bit, and he was kind of up and down. Had the 1 year where they went to the playoffs. He looked good against the Vikings in that playoff game. That caused them to sign him to a $40 million a year deal, which almost was instantly regrettable, right? And then he suffers the ACL, and it kind of stinks for everybody involved, right? Daniel Jones wanted to be the Giants quarterback forever. Like, that's the dream you have when you get drafted in the top 10 by a team. You have a little bit of success. You really want to be that guy. The Giants thought they had their guy, or at least hoped they had their guy. And now everybody's got to start over. Daniel Jones has to go find a place where he can go play in the NFL. And I don't know necessarily he's going to find another opportunity to start, unless it's maybe as a bridge guy to Shedeur Sanders or whoever next year's rookie is going to be. And for the Giants, it's a total reset for them. Tommy DeVito's not the quarterback of the future. We all know that. So it's a sad day from both sides. It's almost like a divorce, right? They got married. When you draft a quarterback in the top 10, you're not dating. You're getting married. They got married. They went through their ups and downs, and they just decided this isn't working. We got to go in a different directions. So again, I mean, people could talk about, well, Daniel Jones got his money, so it doesn't matter. It does matter. This is a sad day for him. I'm sure he wanted, like, you don't want to get your starting job taken away from you. You don't want to get your job taken away from you, period. That's what happened. He's got to go find a new chapter in his career. The Giants have to go find a new quarterback for the future. It's just it's a tough day for both sides.
Yeah, peek behind the curtain, too, on that for a second. When people say, well, he got his money, it doesn't matter. That's such a failed logic because, you know, frankly, I can go back to, a year and a half ago when I parted ways with ESPN. Nice way of saying that they told me I didn't need to come to work anymore. Sort of the little dirty secret that a lot of people don't realize in that process is that at that company, media contracts are guaranteed. So my contract was fully guaranteed. I could have sat on my butt and not worked at all for almost 2 years. I had 2 years left on my deal. And so, you know, it'd be easy to sit there and say, well, what do you care? You're going to get paid for the next 2 years. You can do whatever you want. It's more about the fact, yeah, but I love doing this. And now I don't get to do this. And now I got to find a new place to do this. Like there's so much upheaval in life that comes from that. I think acknowledging that whatever Daniel Jones got from the Giants, he earned from the Giants. And, you know, that contract situation is what it is. At this point, it's not about the money. It's about the fact that you played football since you were 7 years old, played at every level. Like this is what you do. It's just your life. And so, you know, I think it really explains some of the emotion he felt yesterday at the podium. Yes. And I think it's why we, you know, the human element of athletes being released. I preach this a lot. Not every player is on the same plane, but so often we turn around and say, well, that guy sucks. It's like, I don't know. If there are only 32 people in the world that are capable of being starting quarterbacks, you probably don't suck. It means that you maybe, fine, you're not as good as Mahomes. Cool.
Yeah, you might be the 28th best in the world and not the 10th best. Like, Uh-huh.
The most of the people sitting there telling Daniel Jones that he sucks aren't even the 28th best person at something in their own homeowners association, nonetheless, in actual life. So I don't know. I have a little bit of a soft spot in my heart anytime an athlete gets cut. And the Daniel Jones thing now gets interesting because once he clears waivers, anybody can sign him. Now, what that looks like, it's complicated. Like, does somebody want to bring him in for the rest of this year and already have him in their system for next year as that bridge guy? Like, I don't know. I think there's some value to that. Is Daniel Jones an epic starting quarterback, Frank? No, but is he a great person to have in the room if you think you might be in position to draft a quarterback? Like, look, if I'm a Raiders fan, I am a Raiders fan. I'm sitting here looking at it and saying, well, Daniel Jones is a hell of a lot better than anybody that's currently in the building. And you don't know if you're going to be able to draft Cam or Shador. You don't know if the team's going to fall in love with any of them. Why not bring them in? Like, so I do think as bad as it has been at times for Daniel Jones, he'll find a job somewhere because there's frankly just too many teams out there that need a quarterback.
Yeah, and I mean, the Giants did this for business decisions as well, but give a hat tip to them for letting Daniel Jones get a jump start on this quarterback frenzy we're going to see next offseason, because it does benefit him. In a perfect world, Daniel Jones finds what Sam Darnold found with the 49ers, right? Last year, Sam Darnold signed with the 49ers, got with a really, really good coaching staff. Didn't play much for the 49ers, but obviously used that to springboard what we've seen out of him with the Vikings this year. And if you're Daniel Jones, you're looking for that type of situation where you can say, I want to get with a team that I can reset. I'm not going to be the savior of the New York Football Giants. I'm just going to be a guy who can learn, who can get better. Yeah, maybe get a chance to start at the beginning of next year. But more than that, find the right opportunity for me. And it's hard to pinpoint that now, what that would be, because bringing Daniel Jones in on a 2-year deal, and I think, I assume that's a perfect ideal spot for Daniel Jones of sign not just for this year, because there's not a ton of value in signing for a team for 7 weeks and then hitting free agency. You're probably not going to play the rest of the year. But to find a team that's willing to give you this year and next year, and then you can hit free agency, maybe you do play well at the beginning of next year. Again, look back at Sam Darnold. I thought okay, whatever. JJ McCarthy's going to be starting by opening day. JJ McCarthy got hurt. You never know what's going to happen in the NFL. So Sam Darnold has turned this into, I'm going to cash in next offseason. I'm going to get a good starting job, a good contract, all this kind of stuff. I think Daniel Jones is in the same situation in an ideal world for him. Finds a team where he kind of learns the offense for the rest of the year, probably doesn't play unless there's an emergency, then has a jump start. He's not January, February, not waiting to see who signs him. He's learning that playbook. He's with the coaches. And then he's got a huge jump start on this new job he has. Maybe you're a bridge guy for Cam Ward or Shador or whoever it's going to be. You get your opportunity with a good coaching staff, and then you do something with that, and then you hit free agency again. The perfect comp to this is the other New York quarterback who was a top 10 pick and failed, Sam Darnold. That's the type of path that Daniel Jones should want to be on now, finding the ideal situation for him to be a long-term success.
All right, this is where we bring C-Rob back into it and take you back to your regularly scheduled programming for what, might I say, was an absolutely hysterical edition of Inside Coverage. Check it out. Y'all, I'm shook. I am shooketh. I am shaken to my core because just a few days ago, Frank and I sat here and we talked about the Steelers, and then they clipped it and they put it up on Yahoo and all the social media people, everybody talking about the love of the Steelers because could they be Super Bowl contenders, all of that. And then what happens last night? The Cleveland Browns, with absolutely nothing to play for in the snow, go out and beat Pittsburgh 24-19. C-Rob, I don't know. Like I've just decided I give up. I can't figure anything out this year. The only thing I know is my favorite team sucks. Everything else is just an absolute question mark for me.
Wait. Before we throw this to Charles, let's not gloss over the end of Wednesday's episode when somebody, it wasn't Jory, it wasn't Stone making his picks behind the glass, it wasn't Jason Fitz, said,
true.
You know what? I think the Browns are going to cover and maybe win this game. I don't know. Somebody said that.
And we all called you a hypocrite. We loudly called you a hypocrite. We all said,
yes.
Frank sat there, like C-Rob, let's just get right into this feisty Friday. C-Rob spent most of that hour telling us that the Steelers could be a Super Bowl contender, that he's surprised that Russ is so much better than expected, and that they might have the best defense in the NFL. And then at the end of the whole show, he's like, but I think Cleveland might be able to pull out the win. C-Rob, I mean, hypocrisy at its finest.
This is what the NFL is.
It snowed.
Cleveland was beating them before the snow. That's going to be the George Pickens. That's going to be the George Pickens revisionist history where, my God, George Pickens, you are a disaster. He comes out and says, the Browns aren't even a good football team, which they're not. I get that. But the Browns are beating them before the snow came. Like the snow might have helped Pittsburgh get back in the game. They got that fumble off Jameis at the end where he just kind of dropped it because it's snowing. But this is the NFL. This is what the NFL does. Like, there's no citadel on the schedule. Every team's tough. And you said this, and I don't think you meant quite like this, but you said the Browns have nothing to play for. But usually every NFL team has something to play for. And what the Browns are playing for on Thursday night was, you could tell by what Jameis is Jameis, all right? I get that, but you could tell he was into that game. Myles Garrett was fired up in that game. You find things to play for. There's a few teams that check out, but usually not by mid-November. And I thought the Browns weren't going to check out.
Listen, I spent all week long listening to Cleveland radio try to fire Kevin Stefanski. And it's been going on for a while now. But this week was, the last 10 days, it's been fire this guy. Mike Vrabel's on the staff. We could just promote Mike Vrabel. He's the head coach we need and all this stuff. Shut up already. Stop trying to fire a good coach. There are other teams in the league that are praying you fire Kevin Stefanski, going, the Browns will do what we need them to do. They'll take the talented parts of their team. They'll blame those parts, and then they'll move on from them, and we'll go ahead and scoop them up. Kevin Stefanski would be unemployed for a whole 10 minutes. Yep. So go ahead. Yeah, fire him. That's a great idea, because Kevin Stefanski's the problem. I'm so tired of hearing Cleveland fans complain about, the roster's got these problems and the coach doesn't do this scheme, and how come your problem is the quarterback. Just stop it. Stop sitting there and trying not to blame the entire collapse of this franchise on making a mistake with Deshaun Watson. There's been injuries. There are all kinds of other circumstances that have played into this. Your coach isn't the issue. Your general manager isn't the issue. Your owner is definitely the issue, particularly when you let him do contracts with quarterbacks. This is still a franchise that's made, two playoff teams? They've had two playoff teams under the stewardship of Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. You just got to stop this nonsense. And I think this game against Pittsburgh is a perfect example of a franchise. Honestly, they could quit. They could absolutely have the RV running in the parking lot, right? That's the typical, this is the quintessential moment where you're like, yeah, this is total collapse. We're seeing other NFL teams do that right now, right? We're seeing other franchises where they're checked out. They don't look like they want to fight for anybody.
Jacksonville.
Jacksonville, absolutely. And I would say last week, look, the game against New Orleans, I was shocked at how poorly the Browns played. I was shocked at how poorly they tackled. Mm-hmm. That did feel like a checkout game for me. But then this week, they come back. They clearly had energy. I do think Jameis he's a roller coaster inside a circus. That's really what this is with Jameis. And but again, they showed up. They had life, right? They had life against the Pittsburgh Steelers team that had every reason on earth to just steamroll them. This could have been Detroit and Jacksonville easily. It could have been 52-6, and no one would have batted an eye. Everyone would have said, "Yep, that's what we expected." Instead, it goes the other way. I think people in Cleveland just need to calm down, understand that it's not the end of the earth with this franchise, that this next offseason is going to be important, that I think there is going to be a pivot away from Deshaun Watson in the offseason, and they're going to start to pick up the pieces, and they should look at this game as something to be hopeful about, frankly.
Okay, but they're 3-8. Let me ask you this real quick. I know you want to get in, Frank, but real quick, C-Rob. They're 3-8. So if you're a Browns fan, are you stuck believing that drafting a quarterback in this year's draft is the thing that's going to take you from 3-8 to 8-3?
No, I don't think. I mean, look, I'm not a fan of this quarterback draft. I'm just not. And we'll go through the process, and there will be teams that need to draft quarterbacks. And I think there are going to be some guys that get pushed up the board. I had an executive tell me the other day he doesn't think there's literally a single quarterback in this draft who's worth a top 10 pick, but they'll make them worth a top 10 pick because they don't have a choice. They need to have quarterbacks. So I wouldn't sit there if you're a Browns fan and go, well, everything just hinges on us drafting a quarterback and that will turn everything around. You're just going to have to, unfortunately, be patient. I know Browns fans don't want to hear that. But you look at this roster, there are still serviceable players on this roster. Okay. There are still pieces here. The Browns were a very popular team at the trade deadline. I talked to a number of franchises that were like, hey, is this guy available? Is that guy available? I mean, there were probably half a dozen players on the Browns roster that they didn't trade that other NFL teams were interested in. That's not a team bereft of talent, okay? And I think the Steelers game shows it's still an organization that can be competitive. They do need to make changes. Quarterback obviously has to be addressed, but again, it's going to require some patience. The Deshaun Watson mistake was vast, significant. It's steep, paying that price. It sucks. But if you want to fire your head coach, fine. Other teams covet him. They'll scoop him up. If you want to fire your general manager, fine. Other teams will covet him. He will be scooped up and put into other personnel departments. It's like the Jets. Joe Douglas gets fragged, and then there are other departments out there going, I don't know, man. His last couple drafts are pretty good. A lot of starters and a lot of backups, quality backups in his last couple of drafts. They will scoop up Joe Douglas and put him right back into action and use him. So if the Browns want to cut off useful limbs, go ahead and cut off useful limbs. See how that goes.
I think the thing about the Browns for me is, and I agree, the whole Stefanski thing, like he's a good coach. By the way, as you have just killed Browns fans for the last 5 minutes here, I'll give Browns fans credits for showing up last night. Like, that stadium was rocking. Like, they were into it in the last minute for a 2-8 team. That was an awesome scene last night with the snow coming down and all that. And that's, this is the NFL. Like, did they lay an egg against the Saints? Yes. There was no way they were going to get up for that game. Who cares? They're playing the Saints in the middle of a Sunday. You come home on a Thursday night, you're playing your arch rival, and the stadium's packed and the snow's coming down. That's going to be your Super Bowl. Like, that, you're going to get up for that game. And they did. Kudos to the Browns for that. I think the problem with the Browns is, they got some serviceable parts and they still got some players, but they screwed up this whole trust the process thing. It sucked when Hugh Jackson was losing every single game, every single week. They had a vision of, we're going to be really, really bad, and we're going to stockpile salary cap. We're going to stockpile draft picks. We're going to build up this great roster, and then we're going to compete for a Super Bowl. And they actually did it well. They were in position where you looked and they had oodles of cap space. They had all these draft picks, and they actually put together a good roster, and they made one mistake. One. And it was the biggest mistake in NFL history. It's the worst trade in NFL history. It's the worst contract in NFL history. And now you get to a point, and Bill Barnwell of ESPN just tweeted this out this week, that the Browns are one of the 5 oldest teams in the NFL. And you look and you say, really, a 3-8 team is one of the 5 oldest teams in the NFL. And I think our window is just closing right now. And you look, they do have good players. Don't get me wrong, Myles Garrett's going to Hall of Fame, and
there's no window. There's no window. But let's be real. There's no window. There's not closing.
No, it never opened.
The window.
That's the problem. It never opened.
Shattered.
Really. The window is. And I just hate that for Browns fans, because they dealt with all this losing with the promise of it's almost like the 76ers, so we're like 2-12 right now. You dealt with all this losing for promise of a better day, and that better day just never comes because you made one mistake. If they did everything else right, that roster, like 3-4 years ago, that roster was like, whoa, this team is stacked. It is loaded. Yeah, okay. And they just screwed up the quarterback. And now they're screwed. Now you're like, okay, they're going to turn the page for Deshaun Watson, and Fitz kind of alluded to this. To what? When you turn the page, that page is blank, dude. Like, there's nothing that's going to save you from this.
I want to remind people, though, again, and we've talked about this in past shows, but I'm going to keep banging on it. Yes, they made a mistake, but they made a mistake that a number of teams were going to make. Atlanta was going to make the mistake. True. Carolina tried like hell to make that mistake. There were a multitude of teams that wanted to make the Deshaun Watson mistake without knowing it was a mistake, okay? That's one thing. That to me it's something that happens in the NFL. You acquire a player. No one could have foreseen this collapse.
Correct.
The way that it happened with Deshaun Watson. Now, that said, the problem was they compounded the mistake. The owner compounded the mistake. He gave Deshaun Watson a contract that was not cuttable. And I think that, to me, is where it's one thing to make the mistake. It's another thing to strap the mistake to yourself forever, for as long as you possibly can in terms of the length of that contract. Because I can tell you right now, had that not happened in terms of the contract, had it not been Jimmy Haslam, who's like, yeah, sure, all right, we'll go ahead and dive headfirst in to a pool that's filled with concrete, they would cut Deshaun Watson this offseason, and there would be not a ton of guaranteed money tied to that deal right now. They could walk away from him had they done the contract the way they should have, and the way everybody else in the franchise, apart from the owner, wanted to do the deal. Had they done it that way, Deshaun Watson would be off the roster. There would be a minimal cap hit this offseason, and you would move on and try to resurrect yourself in normal fashion. Unfortunately, you can't do that. There's going to be a massive cap hit. There's going to be massive cap problems tied to it. But that's the owner, okay? And you can blame everybody else for it, but it's the owner who created this problem as it exists today.
That's also one of the problems, guys, with the concept of trust the process and tanking in general. Like, at some point, it's a hell of a lot easier to lose a bunch of football games than it is to do everything right in the rebuild. And that's a part of this. Like, sure, if you think as a fan, the answer is, I want my favorite team to be as terrible as possible so that we can get the best draft picks possible, then you also have to look around and say, all right, are we really positioned as an organization? Have we earned the benefit of the doubt to then use that draft equity, that available cap space? Have we done everything necessary to make sure that when we rebuild, the foundation is sound and sure? And more often than not, teams that are so bad that in any sport that they get to the spot of trust the process, they're bad to that point because they were bad at the things it takes to be good. So I just, I want to be a beacon of light in a dark, dark world, but I can't be because sucking is a lot easier than turning around and trying to figure out how to rebuild this thing the right way. And the Browns are living proof of that. So you live through all of this terrible, and then you try and rebuild, and you're like, I can't get it right.
I want to point out that we had a producer who told us, don't spend the first 6 minutes of the show talking about chocolate muffins today. And instead we're like, let's talk about the Browns.
We'll show you. We'll talk about the Cleveland Browns for 10 minutes.
There you go. Yeah, it's not muffin talk, but it's Browns talk.
Fitz, when you're talking about, being terrible at tanking and where does it lead you, I also think that there's a cross-sport equivalence that doesn't add up to the NFL. And let me explain. Like, the Chicago Cubs and the Houston Astros both tanked out. Like, they were like, we're going to be awful for a few years, but we're going to come back, and they won World Series out of it. And Houston's still going. Like, Houston really did it correctly. NFL, you can't really, it's hard to do that. It is because you have this really, really small window where your good players are going to be good because everybody's career span is pretty low and they're all going to want contracts and all this kind of stuff. So even tanking in the NFL, man, you got to land that plane on a very, very small runway to get it right to where, okay, we're here. All of our guys are good before they get paid and we're going to spend this money in free agency. It's hard to trust the process, do that in the NFL. As well as the Browns did it, you still see the flaws in it. And yes, for all these fans who are like, oh, I just want them to tank. I want them to lose. That once in a generation, you should tank. The Jets probably should have tanked for Trevor Lawrence, even though we have issues with him too. But what's the difference between a 6th pick and a 13th pick of the draft? Like, that's just dumb. Like, that's not the way you're going to turn your franchise around. It's through something a little more sustainable than just let's lose a bunch of games and get the 2nd pick in a bad draft.
Well, not only that, I mean, there's even in the NFL, even known commodities, what you think you know, what you've seen tangibly out on the field. Sometimes you can't even trust that because let's look at the Detroit Lions. When they made the deal, the Matt Stafford, Jared Goff swap, and the Lions get all these draft picks strapped to Jared Goff in that deal, and we're sitting there going, well, they'll cut Goff after a year. Like, that's kind of the throw in. Like, come on, he's not really a serviceable starting quarterback at this point. He's overpaid. Oh, wait. It turns out he's the cornerstone of the entire deal
team in the NFL.
That you made. Jared Goff was done. He was toast. It was over.
And now he's the MVP, Charles. He's the MVP. He's going to win MVP this year, right?
Look, he's in at the very least. He's in the conversation, right? Like, it's crazy that we would even talk about Jared Goff being in the MVP conversation in this kind of a season where we've got other quarterbacks playing out of their minds. But we knew that Deshaun Watson was a top 5 talent, right? He was going to be a top 5 talent. He was young. He's dynamic. He can make plays. All these things. The trade happens. We knew that Jared Goff was done. It was over. Sean McVay had washed his hands of him. He couldn't get rid of him fast enough. He was strapping 1st-round picks to the guy to get him out the door. The contract, $30+ million. Oh, what a ridiculous deal for this guy. They never should have extended him. He's finished. They make the trade, and look what happens. It turns out he's a good player.
Do you believe them when they were like, no, we actually believed in Jared Goff? I don't believe that for a second. I just think that he kind of evolved in a way that they did not expect. Do you think that there was anything to, we thought we were kind of getting something with Jared Goff? I don't believe that. Do you?
I mean, Brad Holmes, comes over from the Rams organization and he
knew his name. He knew Jared Goff when he walked in a building.
He knew his name.
But I don't think he knew that Jared Goff was going to be a good quarterback.
I don't think anybody knew that this could ultimately happen with Goff. But I mean, look, we're getting off subject here. We talked about Cleveland. We spun this into Detroit. We're doing everything we can to not talk about Pittsburgh.
Do we have trust issues, C-Rob? Do you have trust issues with the Pittsburgh Steelers now?
Yeah, thank you. Like that's something I think we should talk about now. Okay, Frank, I hear what you're saying. No, not at all. Like, they're fine. Okay, well, George Pickens wasn't even the frame Like I had a hard time finding him on the Hail Mary.
What was he doing
at the end of the game? I'm like, where the hell is George Pickens on this play? And for much of the night, it wasn't making a ton of plays
most of the night. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Russell Wilson gets sacked 4 times. The running game was okay. It just shocked me that this was a game where it felt tailor-made for the Steelers to put a number on the Browns, to hang a number on the Browns, with the momentum that they had, the direction the franchise has been going since Russ took over. And then look what happens. I mean, in a way, they kind of got punched in the mouth. I mean, the highlight of the night is Jameis Winston running it in, right, in the end zone, like throwing his body out there to score a touchdown.
Which was awesome, by the way. It was a great play.
Like, how do you let this happen if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers? And I'll ask you guys. Fitz, you ask me. I ask you guys, like, we just going to pretend this isn't concerning? I mean, like, it's not great.
It's not. Look, they're coming off a massive win against the Baltimore Ravens. You got to turn around on the road 4 days later and play the 2-8 Cleveland Browns. This was a letdown spot like crazy. We want to believe that these guys are every single game's a Super Bowl. It's human nature to let down. I knew that's why I picked the Browns. I knew the Steelers were going to let down in this game. That was human nature there. And the Browns, look, it was a freaking blizzard in the second half. And the Browns went 4 of 4.
It's a blizzard for the Browns,
down.
too.
Like,
it was a blizzard for the Browns.
I'm just saying it was a weird condition. It was a letdown spot for the Steelers. The Browns had everything. This was their Super Bowl type of game. And if they're 3 of 4 on 4th down, the Steelers win that game.
Hey, Fitz, it was a blizzard for the Steelers, man. They really, that warm weather team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the identity of that Southern franchise, the Pittsburgh Steelers. What are you talking about?
It makes for weird stuff. And I don't think the Steelers are any worse off today than they were yesterday. I don't. Okay, I think the Steelers are just fine.
Frank, they beat the Raiders team that is terrible. Then they beat a Jets team that's terrible. Then they beat a Giants team that's terrible. They did get a nice win against the Commanders and a win that we talked about the other day. They went
back-to-back against the Commanders and Ravens. Like,
I know, but I thought there were concerns with the offense. Look, the offense didn't click against the Ravens defense that would allow a Pee-wee team to go out and throw for 300. There were concerns about the fact that the Steelers offense didn't look on schedule the way we thought it would look against Baltimore. Never concerns about Pittsburgh's defense. I think we all agree with that. There's just not concerns about Pittsburgh's defense, although they gave up 24 points to Jameis Winston and the Browns. So,
one of those was off of a 16-yard punt, and one of them was off of, Jameis, a fumble. There was just the Browns had 2 very, very short drives, if I remember right, to get a lot of points.
But do we not committed 2 turnovers late in the game? The Browns commit 2 turnovers, right? And what does Pittsburgh do with that?
They could because it's a blizzard. You saw the game. Weird stuff happens in a blizzard.
A blizzard?
Weird stuff happens. Weird stuff happens.
That was just snow. That wasn't a blizzard. Out of here. And it didn't stop snowing every time the Browns had the ball.
They were showing Chris Boswell's field goal, and everybody was like, "Did it make it?" Like even Al Michaels was like, "I don't know if he made it or not."
This is literally the limpest. This is the most limp, ineffective NFL films argument I've ever heard. It started snowing. Oh my God.
And they were getting beat before that. I get that, but I don't have any problem with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the one problem with the Steelers do have one problem, and this is their schedule. Their schedule coming up is a monster. So you really couldn't afford to blow a game like this. That's the problem, because you have at Eagles, at Ravens, even I think at Bengals still coming up. So, and Bengals are what they are, but they're not an easy out. So yes, the Steelers' schedule is tough. This loss is probably going to cost them the AFC North. But as a team, I think the same about them today that I did yesterday. They're still a very, very good football team.
I look forward to revisiting this down the stretch.
Look, the Browns Steelers have faded. The Ravens. It might be because of the schedule, but not because of who they are. They're a good football team.
Wait, whoa.
They play at the Eagles. They play at the Ravens.
I don't care if you're a good football team. Schedule.
Oh my God! So you're just walking into Philly.
Are the Detroit Lions sitting there?
The Detroit Lions are the best team of football.
They're sitting there going, "Oh, the schedule.
Come on, the schedule. You can't do that." I'm not saying the Steelers are the Lions. The Lions are the best team of football.
I have never heard someone
very good. Come on.
We're
saying the Steelers suck because they lost a game where they gave them 4 fourth downs.
Oh, the schedule. They're a good team, but the schedule. Oh.
It is. The schedule's tough. The schedule's very tough coming up.
Okay, a couple of things here. Number one, Frank, we're saying the same thing. my opinion on the Steelers really hasn't changed because I was concerned a few days ago about the fact that the offense didn't look good enough against the Ravens, and I'm still concerned about that offense. But you mentioned the schedule, but you're leaving out the fact that they have 2 games left against the Bengals team that, in theory, in the win-loss column at least, sucks. And they have another game against the Browns, who last time I checked until last night were a 2-win football team. Like, they got 3 games in front of them that if they are worthy.
They'll win those. They'll win winnable games.
They'll win winnable games. This is so great. This was a winnable game that they didn't win. And you know what? You can show me the time where bum the Pittsburgh Steelers, the steel curtain, but then the schedule got hard, and then it started to snow, and the steel curtain turned into a wet drape.
Nobody is saying this is the 1974 Steelers. Nobody's saying that. I'd say they're a very, very good football team. That's all.
They're a good team, but you're like, but it snowed. They're a good team, but the schedule got hard.
Oh my God.
Give me a break. A good team plays a tough schedule and wins. A good team plays in tough conditions and wins.
They have beat tough games. They beat the Commanders and Ravens in the span of 8 days. Like, they have played good teams. Like, I'm just saying, like, if you go and lose at the Eagles, I'm not like, oh, see, I told you the Steelers stink. Like, no, it's the Eagles. They're awesome right now. They're probably going to lose that
I can't wait to revisit this down the stretch.
Oh my God.
Emmy, our producer, will I'm sure find some clip of this that we can replay to torture either of you on this, depending on how.
Also, the Steelers are done. They're just the Jacksonville Jaguars now. They lost because they gave up 4
They started to play good teams. Oh my God. They're good. They're a good team, but then they actually played other good teams, and that's the harbinger of doom.
Terrible,
as long as Pittsburgh only has to play really easy teams and the weather's perfect, they will be perfect for the rest of the year.
You guys are ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Oh, all right. We're gonna continue the madness, but we're gonna take the madness from the Pittsburgh Steelers to Aaron Rodgers. Where could he play next season? Plus some quarterback contract situations we're keeping an eye on. We'll dive into that next. We're still worked up.
I'm still laughing right now.
We're still worked up.
I'm just thinking of NFL films.
John Facenda. You're doing a terrible John Facenda, by the way.
The curtain of snow descended on the matchup.
But then a good team showed up. but then the clouds rolled in and some snowflakes fell on the field.
John Facenda's rolling in his grave over that imitation. I'm just telling you, C-Rob.
I used to love those. It was always great. Young kids go out and find it on YouTube. At the end of the year, NFL Films did a 30-minute recap of every single team.
Oh, yeah.
And the funniest part about that is listening to them talk about, because they always tried to find a way to make it dramatic. And then you'd have like a team that just sucked. And listening to them try and find a way to fill 30 minutes of drama with a team that was absolute trash was really a delight. Maybe those teams weren't bad. Maybe there was just snow.
The Pittsburgh Steelers are awesome because they played the creamsicle John Robinson Buccaneers. But then the Buccaneers weren't on the schedule every week, and that changed a good team into a bad team.
All with dramatic drums in the background. Okay, speaking of melodramatic, Aaron Rodgers. Interesting, because from the QB room, the conversation, and I'm stealing this, the Aaron Rodgers multiverse of madness. We talked a little bit about this on Wednesday. C-Rob, I want to get your thoughts on it, because Jory made a great point that Aaron Rodgers is not dissimilar at this point to Bill Belichick, in the sense that, both, if you're bringing them in to do one thing, it seems like a no-brainer. But if you're bringing them in and giving them total power, that's a much different conversation. With all of that being said, from what you understand, how appealing is it? Like, where is Aaron Rodgers going to play next year, if anywhere?
Look, I when I wrote about this, I led off with Favre's experience with the New York Jets. Because I think a lot of people forget that was a season where the Jets were 8-3. Favre was the biggest thing going. There was mania in New York over Brett Favre that season and the 8-3 start. But then, he tore a bicep tendon, right? And no one knew about it. And the next thing you know, they finished the season 1-4. He's throwing, I think he had two touchdowns, 9 interceptions down the stretch. They completely tanked. They end up being a 9-7 team. They missed the playoffs. And Favre tells the Jets, I'm retiring. It was like over. You looked at him and you're like, yeah, he's old. He's spent. This is it's terrible. There's nothing left there. Then Brett Favre being Brett Favre, he unretires. The Vikings get him back on the field in August. a few months after he retires. And I think that season he threw like 33 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. One of the best. They go all the way to the NFC title game. They lose. MVP, yeah. They lose to a New Orleans Saints team that was the whole Bounty Gate game in that NFC title game. And then I think that it was a narrow loss, and then the Saints go on to beat the Colts in the Super Bowl. So you're really looking at, it was an insane bounce back for Favre. And I try to keep that in perspective because I'm looking at Aaron Rodgers right now and I'm going, it's not really anything there. Like, it's over. It feels over. Physically, he looks like it's over. Mentally and verbally, I mean, it feels like it's gassed, right? And you have to apply that now moving forward. It sounds like, for all intents and purposes, he's not going to be a New York Jet after this season. And we look outward and we go, well, there's not really any real landing spot for this guy. Like, this is it. It's done. Well, we're saying that now, but things haven't unfolded in other places. And I'll bring up one team in particular. Do I think Aaron Rodgers is going to play for the San Francisco 49ers? No. Was there a time in history when the San Francisco 49ers wanted Aaron Rodgers to play for them? Yes. And it was not that long ago. It was 2021. I know that's a lifetime in the NFL, particularly considering that, players can fall off pretty quickly. I will say this about the 49ers. Brock Purdy has been up and down this season, okay? The remainder of this schedule is very important for him. For his extension purposes, I think he has to finish out the season strong. I think if he doesn't do that and they miss the playoffs, I think the 49ers will be inclined to go, let's wait on the extension. Let's go ahead and let him play out the 4th year of his contract. We can always franchise tag him. That's not the plan right now, by the way. The plan is to extend him. But if things change and Brock Purdy, it has some inconsistency and they miss the playoffs, all I think about with Kyle Shanahan is after they lost the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo, the next offseason, I remember people in the league telling me, Kyle's a little shaken on Jimmy Garoppolo. Kyle's got some doubts about Jimmy Garoppolo. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? They just went to the Super Bowl. Like, if Emmanuel Sanders, if he catches a pass in that game, the 49ers win the Super Bowl with Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo. How is this possible? Kyle can run hot and cold with guys, okay? I'm not saying that.
So could his dad, by the way. Go look up Jake Plummer after the 2005 season when they went to the AFC Championship game.
I just, look, there are teams out there where I'm sure Aaron Rodgers, he said he wants to play in 2025. You talk to people who are close to him, they're like, look, he doesn't want this Jets thing to be his legacy. So I think he does have motivation to still play at least one more season. And if the right situation presents itself, I think he would be on board with that. I don't think he's going to be on board with a rebuild. I don't think he's going to want to go someplace where there's a bunch of drama and problems. But I think, again, if the right situation presents itself, like the Vikings presented themselves to Brett Favre, we could be looking at a situation where he goes and he plays somewhere else, and there's a little bit, there's some juice left in the squeeze. And I'm going to be watching the 49ers really closely because I'm just telling you, I think that Purdy is in a critical juncture right now with that head coach and with that franchise, knowing that they want to extend him, but he's got to show down the stretch in imperfect times in a franchise, you can put it together and lift all the pieces around you. And by the way, I'm a big Brock Purdy guy. I think they should extend him. I think that's the plan right now. I don't think that's changed, but I do think there's a lot of football left to be played. And as messed up as it is to think that this is reality, Aaron Rodgers could be available and it could tempt some veteran coaches that are sitting there going, we got to make something happen. We have a window that's closing. We got to win right now.
For sure. And there's something to be said about that. But I wonder this on Wednesday, Aaron Rodgers seems like he's very hyper aware of stuff like his legacy. Like he's just for any things we could say about Aaron Rodgers, very smart guy, he knows what he's doing. He's very calculating. And I just wonder if he knows that it's not good. Yes, it happened with Favre. Odds are though, it's not going to get better next year.
Right.
He's not going to, odds are he's closer to the cliff than anybody really wants to admit. He's had some halves of football where me and you, Charles, have been texting oh my goodness, like this is the week we have to write that like it's over for. This is Willie Mays falling down in the outfield. Like this is really bad for Aaron Rodgers. And then he's kind of righted the ship in the second half or whatever. So he's not off the cliff yet, but man, it's getting close. And I just wonder if he wants to, and he doesn't seem like a guy either who needs football, who is just like, I got nothing else to do. I'm going to play until they close the doors on me. So I just wonder if he really wants to start over.
Frank, admit the historical perspective. And again, this is why I went back to Favre. I remember that year with Favre. I'm old as I remember sitting there and going, oh God, like it's just, what happened to this guy? Like what, how
with the Jets,
how
he was
horrible.
awesome with the Jets for the first 11 games.
But the last 5 games, it was terrible.
Yeah,
and we were like, what is going on with this guy? Like,
but I think that's the difference. It was an injury. Like,
but we didn't know that at the time.
Yeah, no, I get
what
that.
if there's something we don't fully know about Rodgers right now?
Yeah, and he's been getting beat up this year. He's gotten hit a lot. So
he's also coming off the Achilles. Like, let's be fair. He's coming off the Achilles, and that can take a second. So.
And I guess if something like the 49ers presents itself, that's a perfect situation, right? But what about some of these imperfect situations? Like, I can't even come up with one off the top of my head, but
Cleveland.
Something where you're
we just talked about
Tennessee.
Tennessee, like, why would you go play? Why go play for Tennessee?
Frank, that's what I'm saying. Like, what I wrote was, here are these situations. Here's why it would happen. Here's why it wouldn't happen.
Right.
By and large, the vast majority of the situations out there, it won't happen because Rodgers is going to sit there and go, yeah, I'm not coming back for that. Like, I'm not going to go play for the Raiders. Right. I'm not going to go play for the Titans. I'm not going to play for the Giants. I'm not going to play for the Panthers. You know, the
What
Browns.
About the Browns, though? What about the Browns? Because we just said, like, okay.
No, the Browns. I don't. I mean, I think the reason why it doesn't happen with the Browns is, as I put it, like, why would it happen? I wrote insanity. I mean, because like you're sitting there and you're the organization's going, okay, we just went through this Deshaun Watson thing. Let's now sign up for the Aaron Rodgers experience in the middle of the. No, I mean, come on. That's not. I don't think anybody there. If they're going to make a change, they're certainly not going to go, let's get older. Let's go to a guy who's, you know, arguably an even bigger circus than the one we're already dealing with at the quarterback position. I just don't see that. I think it has to be a very streamlined special situation.
What about the Steelers, who Russ is on a 1-year, $1.2 million deal?
So Steelers.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, we could throw out these, like the Steelers. What do you like? I don't know. I just worry, not worry, but
Tomlin
I just wonder.
likes Rodgers too, man.
Yes,
he really, Mike Tomlin and Rodgers, they got a thing.
Russell Wilson's going to have a market because we've talked about how weird the offseason is going to be next year. That game of musical chairs, it's not just one fewer seat for everybody. It's like 4. Like, there's going to be teams at the end who are like,
are the Steelers going to meet that market, though? Like, I think that's a fair question here. Is like, are the Steelers going to be willing to give Russ a ton of money?
I wouldn't. Like,
I mean, a ton. No, I don't. I don't even think that would. One of the things that I end up writing about, and you know, I think we're going to talk about some of these quarterback contracts later.
We'll go to it now.
Is and obviously this is prior to the Browns loss, but I started poking around in a couple of different quarterback contracts, and I'm like, you know, what does this look like? And Russell Wilson was one of them, and the definite. I think the feel on Russell Wilson is, look at the contract that Rodgers signed with the Jets. Like, that's really the kind of contract that Russell Wilson would have waiting for him. He's, you know, you're talking about a 36-year-old player who is rebounding, obviously, from the Broncos checking out on him, Sean Payton checking out on him. He's had a nice run up until this point, obviously up until the Browns game. I don't think any team is going to sit there and go, we're going to commit a ton of money to this guy. I think they're going to sit there and say, all right, 3 years, $120 million. We'll give you enough guaranteed money so that we're tied to you for the next 2 seasons, but that's it. We'll give it a 2-season run here. And then after that, we can walk away from you free and clear. And maybe if you play really, really well in 2025, if you're exceptional, we'll restructure that contract so there's some guaranteed money in the 3rd year. If you just come out like gangbusters in 2025 and show us you're capable of playing into your 39th year on this planet and still be a high-level quarterback. But there's a lot of football to be played. I'm a little shaken, again, based on the Browns loss. And it's something that I think is going to have to continue to be recalibrated. I wouldn't have said going, and I left it. It's funny. I left the Steelers off my list when I was talking about Rodgers because I thought, Russ has gone 4-0. He's looked good. He kind of fits what they want there. Tomlin clearly wanted him to be the starting quarterback, but by the same token, they're not working on doing an extension right now. They're gonna wait 100% to do the deal until the offseason. And if that's the case, does that open the door potentially for Rodgers? Maybe, because again, he and Mike Tomlin have an extremely high level of respect for each other. And the Steelers are a roster that I would say it's built up enough for a veteran, as Russ has walked in, for a veteran to come in and win. And if they decide we're not going to commit to Russ long-term, we're going to take this bridge situation another year, maybe Rodgers ultimately is that guy. I did not foresee it heading into Thursday night, but now maybe I'm rethinking that.
This is where it gets really interesting because you're almost talking about, as an organization, having to sit there and say, well, we could pay Russ this much or we could pay Aaron Rodgers this much. And you already mentioned Brock Purdy, but let's go there for a second. Like, all right, so if you're Brock and you're sitting here and you haven't really made a lot of money and they're going to come to the table, presumably, like you play well through the end of the season, what's that look like? If you're Purdy and if you're the 49ers trying to assign value to Purdy, who has had some really great moments and has also had some really, he might only be pretty good. Like, they say you can't overpay a quarterback. Y'all know I've been saying pay him for a long time. But, I do think if you're the 49ers right now, maybe you got to be careful. What's it look like?
If you're his agent, you're saying, I want $60 million plus $1 a season. You're saying, I want him to be the highest paid player. And that's the economics of NFL agents right now are if you have a quarterback who is either inside the top 10 or young enough and projecting to be inside the top 10, you say, when we sign the deal, we want him to be the highest paid player in the NFL. That's what will happen with Brock Purdy. Now, will the 49ers be inclined to give him that kind of a deal? Let's see how the season finishes. I think if Brock Purdy goes on a run, if he shows down the stretch, okay, you know what? I can raise the level of the players around me. I can find some consistency. We can get some traction, get back into the playoffs. We can once again be a threat. Coming into the season, we thought, okay, hey, that's still a Super Bowl level team. If they can showcase that down the stretch and Brock Purdy is the centerpiece of that, he's going to be the highest paid player in the NFL when he does that extension. But that's a lot on his plate right now. And I would argue that up until this point, he has not shown that he can have that kind of a sustained run when other parts of the team badly need him to be the guy who takes wrong and makes it right. And by the way, which is
going to happen if he makes $60 million a year, which I talked about 8 weeks ago. And you guys all were like, oh my God, how could you dare say that about Brock Purdy? But go on, Charles, go ahead.
I never said, I don't know what you're talking about. I never said that. Clearly was the other show. That was the Muffin Show, because I was not the one saying.
I was the one saying paying Brock Purdy 50. I was saying 55 at the time. Paying him $55 million a year is a slippery slope, because all of a sudden you can't pay. You're not going to have George Kittle and Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel and all these guys and Christian
McCaffrey.
About
that, but that's not what quarterbacks get paid on, Frank. The teams aren't out there going, well, okay, we can't pay him this because we're not going to have this guy and that guy. That's not how NFL agents aren't sitting there going,
well, listen, I know at some point your question
should work that way.
Can you make a championship team with Brock Purdy making $55 million a year? That should be the question they're asking.
No, but
should Trevor
what about
Lawrence
the other
gotten the deal he got? No.
But the other question is, can you build a championship team with Trey Lance as your quarterback?
But it doesn't have to be Trey Lance. It could be it could be Jimmy Garoppolo. Could you do it, Jimmy Garoppolo? Yeah, they really could if they covered Jet Chip Wasp.
And how did they try and replace Jimmy Garoppolo? They tried to replace him with Trey Lance, and they were wrong. You can't just plug anybody in.
No, you can't just plug anybody. But you could plug a lot of guys in. Kyle Shanahan can plug a lot of guys in and have success. Kyle Shanahan's
success
really,
to that
really good.
level. Success to that, are we really saying that the business model for the 49ers is to simply press reset at the quarterback every 3 or 4 years and bank that they can do what no other team in sports can?
I think they're the one team that could.
Because I think we're giving way too much benefit of the doubt to Kyle Shanahan. I think it's amazing and incredible that they found a quarterback at the end of the draft. Just like it's
Brock
amazing and
Kyle.
incredible.
Brock saved Kyle.
It was huge.
He did. Brock saved Kyle. It's a reality. He covered for the massive organizational mistake that you can't make, which was drafting Trey Lance. And they honestly, they lucked into Brock Purdy. It was the last pick in the draft. You can't tell me that was skill. It wasn't a skill pick at that stage.
Just like Brady. Brady was
just like Brady. It was not a
and they passed up Brady like 6 times.
Pick.
Like,
it's not a skill pick in the 6th round.
And look, I know Brady won Super Bowls out of the gate, and that makes this a different conversation. But can we imagine going back to the Patriots? Like there were Patriots fans that loudly believed the minute Brady was out the door, well, we found Brady. We'll just find the next Brady. I'm not saying Purdy's anywhere near Brady, but I'm saying finding the next Purdy is a hell of a lot more difficult for San Francisco than anyone wants to give it credit for. I believe they got lucky, and they're good. A combination of those two things. I don't think you can bank your future in a franchise on that. So, like, if I got to pay him $55 million to make sure that I don't accidentally get another Trey Lance, same organization scouted and decided they wanted Trey Lance. They got it that wrong. So am I going to bet that I'm going to get it that wrong again, or that I'm not going to get it that wrong? I'll take the sure thing all day, every day.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And I will reiterate, the plan right now is to extend him. That's it. It hasn't changed.
I think they will. Everybody does. Everybody extends a quarterback.
But there's a lot of football left to be played. And
they got a tough schedule. You want to get on me about tough schedules? Look at San Francisco.
Well, and
I don't think they're making the playoffs, guys.
It's reported that he missed half the practice yesterday, right? Mm-hmm. That he was throwing. Mm-hmm. He might have a shoulder problem now. There's other things that could play into this down the stretch. And look, I'll say, let's say he does have a shoulder issue. Well, probably off the bat, I'm not paying him after, because I'm going, okay, well, now that's twice he's had issues, right, with his throwing arm. I'm going to go ahead and wait. I think the most likely scenario, if he does not play well down the stretch, is that San Francisco goes, we're going to cool the extension talk a little bit, unless there is a really favorable deal that we can get done, which I would say is probably in the low 50s, like a Jared Goff type of deal. I think if that deal presents itself and there's not like really any real arm problem in terms of an injury, I think if that deal presents itself, I think the 49ers go, let's go ahead and do that, because that's a good deal in our favor right now. But they're definitely not doing a let's reset the market quarterback deal with him if he does not play well down the stretch. I still look at this situation and I think we are heading a little more toward the Niners saying, we got another year. Let's just take another year and measure it. And if he plays gangbusters, it'll just be like Dak. We'll have to franchise tag him. We'll pay through the nose. And
wouldn't he just hold out at that point? Wouldn't, if the 49ers are like, let's cool it for a year. If you're Brock Purdy making, I don't even know what he's
so next year, his salary cap number. Next year's salary cap number is 1.1. His career earnings so far.
I'm like, I am not playing for you guys.
Absolutely.
Like,
he could.
No way in heck.
His career earnings is $2.8 million.
Are the
2.8 is all he's made.
Franchise I would do that with.
What are you talking about? They've each of the last 2 years they've had a guy hold out and get the bag. Like, they're the franchise to do that with. Like, I'm going to hold out and get my money, just like Nick Bosa, just like Brandon Ayuk did.
Yeah,
but there's a way I'm playing for 1.1.
I don't know, man. Nah, I don't. Kyle and quarterbacks, it's different. I'm just telling you, I don't that guy and his relationship to that roster. There are 52 relationships, and then there's the starting quarterback. Like for Kyle, I truly believe that. Mm-hmm. I think the way someone explained to me when I was spitballing some ideas about like who could end up with the Rams, and I was talking to somebody in the Rams organization, and he was like ticking people off the list because he's like, no way, like that, like Sean McVay, that guy would drive Sean McVay nuts, and and Sean would drive that guy nuts. There's no way, there's no survivability in that relationship. I think Kyle is that kind of guy, which also, by the way, I think kind of plays in favor for Brock Purdy, because he has shown he's got the ability to deal with Kyle in that way. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo did. I think Jimmy Garoppolo had there was a problem there where Jimmy Garoppolo was not the kind of guy who was going to take criticism, be fiery, give it back to Kyle when people weren't, looking. I think Brock is that kind of guy. I think he is more of a fighter, and that plays into the relationship working. But I don't look at this like any other situation in terms of who else got extensions and who held out and who gets babied. I think quarterback is just a different animal when it comes to Kyle Shanahan, like it is for a couple of, Sean Payton. I think Sean Payton's quarterbacks, that's a different relationship he has than any other player on the roster.
Sure.
Sean McVay, it's a different relationship than any other one he has on the roster. I think there are a couple of guys out there who can draw it up and who are good play callers and these so-called geniuses who are extremely hard on the quarterbacks that they play with. I mean, look at what happened with McVay and Goff. When McVay decided Goff couldn't do it anymore, that was it. It was done. Goff was toast. It was over. It can happen with Kyle.
The trust issues. We're going to break down trust issues next. We're going to look at some of the best teams in the AFC and NFC and figure out who we can actually trust. We'll take a quick break, then we'll break it down. All right, gentlemen, let's have a little trust conversation. And we're talking about, can they win the AFC? All right, that's the real question here. Is this team good enough to win the AFC or NFC respectively? We'll go through both conferences. I think Charles and I have squarely shown you that we don't, for example, trust the Steelers to be able to win the AFC. Frank, would you trust Pittsburgh to be able to win the AFC? I know you've been big on them. Would you trust them to win the whole conference?
Could I ask how much snow was involved?
Yeah. And are they playing a tough team?
I'm blocking you. Can I block him from the podcast? Is there an Emmy? Can I block Charles? Is that a possibility? Anyway, I think, okay, like there's a way to put this, and we always say, well, can this team win the AFC? And I think the answer is always usually yes. There's only a few teams where you're like, you made the playoffs, but there's absolutely no way you could win the AFC. Who would I comfortably pick to win the AFC right now? And would I comfortably pick the Steelers? And I think my answer is yes. I think I would. I think they have the ability with that defense to go in and beat anybody. They're very much on the cusp. I'm not feeling great about it, but would I put my hard-earned money on the Steelers to win the AFC at the right odds? I think yes. I think I'd feel okay about that because their defense travels, and I think they're a really, really good, sound, well-coached football team.
C-Rob, you're squarely on the don't trust the Steelers to win the AFC, correct?
George Pickens is your best player on offense. How much do you trust George Pickens?
It's a problem.
That's it. I mean,
the defense
straight up, like
he's so good. The defense
that's fine. That's great. The defense is really good. I'll give you that. There's no question. Their defense is exquisite, and there are a number of teams in the NFL that have great defenses. But you have to look at the other side of the ball, and there's no question when it comes to Pittsburgh, their best offensive player, including the quarterback, is George Pickens in terms of the talent and the ability for him to change games. He disappears. He just does. And if I just focused it through that, do you trust George Pickens to win you a game? Nope.
No.
So I can't trust.
But yeah. No, I get it. I understand it.
All right.
But real quick, let's go. I'll play you, Fitz, for a second here. What about the Ravens? Because they have a fatal flaw. Like, they have a great obviously, MVP quarterback, right? Like, he's playing at that level. Derrick Henry's great. All that kind of stuff. They also have a fatal flaw in that they have the worst pass defense in the NFL, and that usually does not play well in the playoffs. Do you guys trust the Ravens? I sit here and I go, how could I not trust the Lamar Jackson team? But I'm also like, they're giving up like 30 yards per game more than everybody else in the air. So I don't know that I do.
I don't trust a team that's awful at something to win the AFC. And the Ravens are awful on pass defense. So no, like, even though I've sat here and said, my God, they should be in that elite, they're not defensively. So quick answer to that for me, C-Rob, is no.
Yeah, and if Frank had any guts, he would have done Fitz's voice when he quote unquote played Fitz. But
I don't think I can. I'll have to try that.
You don't have.
I feel like you doing John Facenda.
Got to hit a couple octaves up.
Yeah, you got it higher. You got to sound like you haven't actually hit puberty yet. Like, you haven't been on your first date. Voice has got to crack at weird times. You got to make people wonder if you did a mountain of cocaine before you start the show. Like, there's a lot that goes into this thing. All right, told you I'd get a mountain of cocaine.
Wait, what did you say? Did you trust the Ravens, Charles? The AFC?
No, I don't. I'm with you. Like, I don't. That pass rush is a significant problem. I mean, I think even defensively, they've had games where I'm like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah, it's been bad.
I trust that offense, but I do think that there's an Achilles there, defensively, particularly up front. They definitely could have addressed that. Well, I mean, it's not like they didn't try to address it at the trade deadline, but right now, I don't think I trust it. There's time to build momentum. This is where teams, real quick before we move on here, this is a time where it's okay. And I think franchises would tell you this, coaches would tell you this, GMs would tell you this. It's okay to say, I don't necessarily trust this team right now because of X. this is where you want to build that peak, right? This is it. This is
Sure.
You don't want to be peaking in October. You don't want to be peaking in November. You want to start to peak in really right about the first, second week of December is where you want to start to put everything together. And that's why I think this could change. Baltimore is a team to me where you could ask me this in a month and I could go, oh man, they've clicked. Like it's it. Like they found the groove.
Yep.
It's possible for them to do that. But right now in late November, no.
Okay, what about what about the Texans? I tried to do a better voice for you there, but Frank, what about the Texans on this one?
No, they've looked bad for about a month now. I mean, that's just, look, I want to be like, oh yeah, CJ Stroud, and they're going to get healthier, and I just don't know, man. They just don't look like it. They look like they've taken a step back this year. CJ Stroud is good, not great this year. I don't see them as a threat in AFC at this
They can't protect. They can't protect.
Yeah, they can't protect. The defense, they just looked okay. They've looked like they're fine. Like they're fine, but they don't look like to me a Super Bowl team.
Again, another team that right now they cannot protect CJ Stroud. So to me, I'm like, there's a fatal flaw there. But Mixon is starting to hit his stride in the backfield. They lost Stephon Diggs, but losing Stephon Diggs and not having Nico Collins on the field allowed them to get a better look at John Mechie. So to me, I'm like, okay, what does hitting their groove feel like for the Houston Texans? I would say hitting the groove feels like Mechie continues to become a bigger part of that offense as the next 6 weeks progress, and Mixon stays healthy. They balance out the offense running and passing, and the pass protection gets a little bit better. That to me is how I would tell you by late December, oh wait, yeah, I feel like that's a Super Bowl team. But now, no.
All right, so I'll combine these two because I think the answer is yes. Bills and Chiefs.
Yeah.
Do either of you not trust one of those teams to be able to win the AFC? Okay, you trust them. See, Rob, you trust them.
I don't know. Maybe Charles doesn't, but yeah, of course.
Bills and Chiefs.
Oh man.
No, I mean, look,
we have a moment of indecision.
My default, of course, is that I try, and here's why. I think they have the two quarterbacks, and I know Mahomes has become, it's interesting because he's really become like kind of a touchy subject with people where they're like, you keep holding him on this pedestal and there's all this effusive praise for a player who is not playing extremely well. He's certainly not playing at the level we expect. That said, he's still been there. And every time I doubt the Chiefs, they're in the AFC title game or Super Bowl. Every single time.
I know. I went 0-4 last year picking against them in the playoffs. Like, what am I doing? Like, yeah.
They have quarterbacks that cover, right? And between those two, I would still have to lean the Chiefs because, again, every time I doubt them, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator, find a way to cover things and propel them forward at the end of a season and through the postseason into a Super Bowl. So those are the two that I definitely feel most sound about. And again, I will lean on the experience of the Chiefs and all of the heavy hitters in that organization who have been there showing up. And like even Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce's not had a great season at all. Do I think Travis Kelce all of a sudden could open up in the playoffs and be that guy again? Yeah, absolutely. Here's the thing about the Chiefs that's interesting to me. I think even they have some like winning fatigue. Like I think even they are like, okay, every year we've played a ton of games. We play way more games than anybody else because we're always going to our title game. We're always going to the Super Bowl. We're always playing these extra games in the playoffs. There's always this pressure on us to win. I think even they have some quote unquote winning fatigue, but I think they shake that off once the postseason starts. In a weird way, they're kind of like an NBA team right now.
Yeah. I was gonna say, yep.
Like
they're like the Shaq Lakers, where they're like, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, they got a great record.
We'll see you in April.
Yeah, and we nitpick the great record because we're like, oh, they're all close games, and they're just not dominant, and Patrick Mahomes isn't playing very well. But I also look at them and I'm like, yeah, they're kind of, even though the record is what it is, it's like an NBA team that has a great record, but you kind of feel like they're not really. They're dicking around a little bit.
They've been a second gear for
exactly. That's it. That's it. The second gear. I think that second gear is there.
And their second gear is still 9-1.
Yeah.
Crazy. I also will say, like, I hear everybody when there's too much effusive praise of Mahomes because he hasn't looked great. The thing of it is NFL games are so often won by 4 or 5 plays total. And Mahomes always seems to make those 4 or 5 plays.
He does.
So I don't really give a damn about the other 60 plays on offense they ran. He makes the 4. that win the game. Okay, go to the NFC. I'm gonna believe that you both trust the Lions to be able to win the conference.
Obviously. Best team in football, easily.
Yeah, I mean, I it's funny because I still, in my mind, and I think it's just embedded from like the last couple of seasons, in my mind, I'm still like, do I trust that defense? Like, do I really trust that defense?
And when Aiden got hurt, I was like, uh-oh, this is going to be like shootout city every week.
Yeah.
The defense has been awesome the last couple of weeks.
All these young guys.
That's why Aaron Glenn's getting a job this offseason.
They've
been really good.
They keep suffering injuries, though. Okay?
I know. Anzalone goes down.
Anzalone goes down.
Right.
Aiden Hutchinson. So those injuries got to stop. I think Anzalone's got to come back at the end of the season. I think Zadarius Smith, okay, you acquired him. Now let's see him step up because he's really, more than ever, he's needed. But the younger players in their defense are getting better. I think Aaron Glenn is doing a really good job right now as a defensive coordinator. I think he's going to be a head coach somewhere next year. I would not be surprised if the Jets prioritize him. I would not be surprised if the Saints prioritize him at the top of their coaching list and their interviews. But I mean, like, offensively, like they're just
unbelievable.
At this point, they're like, even if our defense, we're just going to hammer team. I loved what they did, by the way, against Jacksonville. I loved that Dan Campbell was like,
fourth quarter.
Yeah, that Dan Campbell was like, screw you, whatever. Like we're the like we're the Lions
for 60 minutes of football. Yeah, screw it. We were going to pass the ball at third down.
We're the Lions, and you're pissed. We're running it up on people. We're the Lions. Like 3 years ago, you're like, who the f- are the Lions? Like the Lions suck. We're the Lions, and like Dan said, it's a great problem to have if people are pissed off that the Lions are now running up the scoreboard on people. It's amazing. That's great.
So let me throw it out to you this way then, because the rest of the NFC is such a cluster. Frank, is there another team in the NFC you genuinely, truly, really trust that could win the conference?
Philly easily. Like, Philly's played good ball. Like, the only time they didn't play good ball was when A.J. Brown was hurt, which now you look back, you're like, that kind of makes sense. They're adapting to Vic's defensive scheme very, very well. They have so many options on offense. This is the one team. If I'm the Lions and if I'm a Lions fan, and you're probably sitting there every day dreaming about, oh my God, this is it. We're going to a Super Bowl. We're going to have 2 home games to get to a Super Bowl. It's finally happening. The one team I'd be like, I don't want to see Philly in the NFC Championship game. That team can match us in every way, and they play good defense, and they're well coached, coordinator level at least. And the Eagles are in circle of trust, no doubt. I think the Eagles could easily win the NFC.
Yeah, I'm with them. I agree. I think the Eagles are. When you look at them offensively, you have a home run hitter at the wide receiver position. You have a home run hitter.
2, really?
Really. But I mean, if we're just talking about their best players at each position, clearly a home run hitter in A.J. Brown, Saquon, home run hitter. Offensive line that really honestly hasn't even been great this season yet.
Because they haven't been healthy.
Yeah. So there's still that. And which is, let's be honest, that's the spine of their offense. And yet they're still playing pretty well. Yep. That's a unit that if it gets healthier down the stretch, they get even scarier. And then defensively, they've got corners, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Linebackers playing
that's difficult. Linebackers are playing really well. Jalen Carter in the middle of that defensive line can turn it on.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Philly and Detroit to me are in a class in the NFC, and then I think it's everybody else.
Is there anybody else? Right. No. Let me just throw this random team out and ask why do we not trust Arizona at this point? If we're just talking about the way they're playing today, and we're talking about, they're getting the quarterback play, their defense has been so much better than any of us expected. They're on a hot streak. They've won 5 of their last 6. Frankly, earlier this season they played Detroit tight, right? So like. And they weren't playing as well then as they are now. Why not Arizona?
I just can't envision them beating Detroit or Philly. They're going to have to go on the road to do it too. Like that's sort of they're playing well. Hats off, Jonathan Gannon doing amazing work this year. I just don't see them on that level. In a 1-game scenario, can Kyler get hot? The defense gets some turnover. Yeah, it could happen. But comfortably picking them to do it, no. I'm not there with them yet.
I don't trust Kyler in consistent pressure situations yet. Like he hasn't proven that to me. And then I don't trust the players he's throwing to. Like, look, Marvin Harrison Jr., no doubt, great talent, still a rookie. I still question on the NFL level and pressure situations. You can talk about, I played at Ohio State and all that other bull. NFL's a different animal. He's been taken out of games this year.
Yes.
I just look offensively and I go, I don't know who at every level. James Conner, obviously, is, I think, really the heartbeat of that offense, if you ask me.
McBride's really good. But again, like, are they on the Lions level? Like, can I trust that defense to hold the Lions to 31 points even at Ford Field? Probably not.
And I know it's just a rookie year and it's early. We all know how talented Marvin Harrison Jr. is, but with the expectations that he had coming in, it's kind of been a disappointment so far, guys. Like, I mean, just at times it's disappeared.
I don't want to say disappointment. He's been
a rookie. He's been a rookie.
He's been a rookie. Yeah.
I mean,
do you guys trust the Packers?
33 catches, 33 catches on 60 targets for 500 yards is not where we thought he would be.
No, true. No, it's true.
For the generational talent type of stuff.
But if you all right, fair enough. I guess if you double those numbers and we're at the end of the season, I would be like, that's less than I expected. So I guess that would be a disappointment compared to but
we thought he'd be Justin Jefferson out of the game.
Right. I mean, like, how reachable? I mean, we thought those expectations. Right?
At least Puka Nacua. I don't know.
Fair, but I think we thought he'd be, he'd be productivity wise where Brock Bowers is. Like, that's the way people were talking about him, and that hasn't been the case. So
Brock's been awesome.
Frank, you mentioned the Packers.
Yeah, I was going to say Packers, Vikings, Commanders. These are good football teams. I don't trust any of them.
They're not on the same level, though, right?
That's the problem. It's the Lions and kind of. I think the Eagles are good enough to be on that level, and nobody else is on that level. Not that they're not good teams. Not that the Commanders aren't a good team. Not that the Cardinals. The one team, and this is dumb to keep chasing this, and I keep talking about this. If the 49ers somehow sneak in the door, I'd be like, okay, well, that team could make a run. They got the talent for it. They're the one team that I would be like, but I don't even know if they can make it. I can sit here and say the 49ers probably aren't making the playoffs, but if they do make the playoffs, I can't rule out them making a Super Bowl. Like, that's kind of their range of outcomes at this point.
Yeah, because I mean that's the team that if they put it together down the stretch, then we're all sitting there at the end of the season going, okay, yeah. I mean, it's
you're
fine.
talking about peaking late. If they peak late, get out of the way.
And we're sitting there going, they had their issues, but it's right now, and that's all that matters.
Yep,
that's the quintessential, I guess, subhead for the 49ers. 49ers have issues this season, subhead. But they worked it out when they had to.
Yeah.
That's it.
As long as they work it out when they have to. That's the one. If I'm the Lions, I would not want to see them strolling into Ford Field either. I hope that the Cardinals win that division and the 49ers are not my problem the rest of the year.
Here's what I know. Usually we would finish with the stupid underdog of the week, but Frank and I haven't missed one of these in 5-6 weeks. So we'll keep on our streak of not getting any of those games wrong. We'll skip that this week. Thanks to Premi doing great work behind the scenes. She's always crushing it. Does a great job with the show. We appreciate her help, even though there wasn't enough muffin talk today. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Jason Fitz, at Charles Robinson, at Yahoo Schwab. If you've listened this far, be sure to rate, review, subscribe. And if you want, go ahead and send us a tweet of which person you think would be which SpongeBob character. I don't know. There's just a hot rumor that one of us might be associated with Mr. Krabs. We'll be back Sunday to recap Week 7. Can't imagine which one of us would be Krabs. Thanks so much for listening.
It was a great podcast, but then it began to snow.
We'll be back Sunday night unless the strength of schedule is bad or there's snow, in which case I don't know if Frank and I will actually be able to show up. We appreciate you guys for listening.